evening, everyone, and welcome to the men who are here. They're few and far between. And I'm Joan Farrer, and thanks, Rifa, for the introduction. And this is Professor Gillian Youngs, and as Rifa said, Gillian ran a very important series of interventions, I suppose, around the digital community where we met Rifa earlier on this year in Brighton. So it's quite a formidable double act, as you can see. So what I've suggested I do is just talk through some slides which indicates the sort of hands-on coalface work that we're doing here at the university, but also with partners outside. And I'll let Gillian introduce her work, which will follow on after mine. Do you want to say something about that now, Gillian? Or?
No,
okay. So I've made notes, so you'll have to forgive me. It's just I always forget what I have to say, and I'm really pathetic. No. So the big idea for me is transdisciplinarity, and it's something that I've been bleating on about for a little while now. The idea was first introduced by a French philosopher in the 1970s, and the world wasn't ready, as very often these visionary ideas come too early for the marketplace. So transdisciplinarity is about a safe space where different types of thinkers can come together and work together, often around a concept or an issue or a theme. And the safe place is where you can trust each other and share ideas. So a lot of the work I'm doing here with colleagues is exactly that. So we have someone in the audience tonight who is a key player in PABS, which is Pharmacy and Biomolecular Sciences. And we have engineers, and we have a lot of different people outside of the creative arena. Of course, they're creatives in their own right. So we use the idea of transdisciplinarity, and that's been a key success in winning significant external bids. Because normally we're expected to work with each other, so graphics work with illustrators or designers work with furniture makers. So for designers to work with pharmacists is quite an unusual synergy, and that's been very appealing to major funding bodies. So the digital, when Rifa first talked about it, I've thought a lot about what that means, and to a lot of us it means ICT. But to me, the digital, we don't really know what it is, because it's, to me, like language, in that we don't know what language does, where it works in science, it works in music. We don't know what the narrative is. There's great writers, there's poor writers, there's slang. So if you look at the digital in relation to language, I think that helps us to think about the future vision of where the digital might go, and the fact that we don't really know where it'll go. So for me, that's a very interesting idea that I discuss with students, and they then take that and develop their own thinking around what the digital could be. So the project tonight, Bridge, building research and innovation deals for the green economy, is a European-funded project. It's worth €2.5 million, of which we at Brighton have a slice, and I'm the principal investigator here. So the digital there, the very obvious discussions we've had there, was about building a map. So furniture makers would map where the forests are in northern France. And from those very simple digital tools, we've been able to make connections, meet people that we've never met face to face, look at their work, drill down into their networks, their technologies. So that very simple mapping tool, in fact, has opened up a whole wealth of connections that we never thought was possible. Design and the digital. So we have a very important design community here, as most of you know who know Brighton. And very often it's seen as handmade or crafty. But in fact, the digital plays a tremendous role in even the craft thinkers amongst our student body. They're looking at 3D printers, they're looking at all sorts of software, but the end result might look very Heath Robinson and homemade, but in fact the work behind that has been significant, often mapped out on screens before the workshop, before the sessions in the workshop even begin. The Bridge project has been about developing entrepreneurs. So for me, research doesn't work unless it's about real-world solutions, and at the bottom of that I believe it's about jobs. So if we can't, as educators, give our students a toolbox of transferable skills that will pay the mortgage, help them run families, then I think in many ways we've failed. So the Bridge project and other projects that I lead are all about jobs creation. So in thinking about entrepreneurs, I thought I might talk a little bit about myself. So I'll quickly hurry through that. So the idea of the entrepreneur in the 1970s, I became one, and probably a lot of people here weren't even born in the 1970s. But I came through fashion and then weaving and then textiles, generally knitting. I had my own SME. We worked all over the United States, Japan, with all links of the fashion textile chain. I then ran Marks & Spencer design rooms, and then Burton Group, which were a big organisation in the late 90s. And then I became an academic, so I worked at Central St. Martin's and have a lot of really famous alumni that I've been privileged to work with. I'd never say teach because, of course, they're so brilliant. You just turn up and, you know, you're just in the same oxygen space with them, and they just brilliant students, brilliant thinkers are like that. You sort of feed off them. And then most recently, I was in New Zealand and then was lucky enough to be invited to Brighton. So have been able to bring those entrepreneurial skills, just looking at my time, into the academic arena. And by transferring a lot of those trained fashion forecasting desirable skills toolbox that I developed into an academic arena is why we've been able to just rake in piles and piles of money. So just to, oh, thanks. Just to finish off, this is really my last slide. The two images on here, the deck chair and the earthquake, are my current sort of cherries that I'm running at the moment. And the deck chairs represent work that we're doing with colleagues in sciences about an early warning toolbox for melanoma. So even our council workers don't have guidelines on how to sweep the streets safely. This work was started in New Zealand, carried on here, and we have an oven-ready bid now ready to go. So that's with smart textiles that change colour. You know, your shorts change colour if you've been in the sun for 20 minutes. An app lets you know when you go into the sun and when you must leave the beach. So there's a raft of 5 different interventions which we know will help alert the young men who are the danger group, actually, between 15 and 22 because of machismo. So they don't cover up, they don't use sunscreen. So that's our target group. And then the second project there, the earthquake, we've developed a new type of smart textile that can be retrofitted into poor parts of the world. So where there's earthquake in Haiti, which isn't a first world country or a developed world country, buildings fall down, people are killed. So this patch can go on to existing buildings, and when an earthquake tremor happens, it will alert a mobile phone or a piece of technology to say your building's been shaken and it needs checked. So those are the 2 projects that are purely digital. They're in the digital domain, they're technology, they're systems, they're mining existing knowledge. All of the raft of tools around the digital world are contained in those 2 projects. So I think that's probably a good place to leave it. And thanks very much for listening. So I'll hand over to Professor Youngs, who has a much more global vision of the digital. So thank you.
Are my slides here? Oh, yeah. Okay, that's me, everybody. I'm Professor of Digital Economy, but don't worry about that. As Reefa, nobody knows what it is. Don't worry about that. I don't think you'll be any more enlightened, but you might be more interested after I've said a few things, so that's good. So, and I'm also Deputy Director of the Centre for Research and Development here in the faculty, in the college it is now. That's an old slide. We're now the College of Arts and Humanities. So I do a lot of research leadership. So really, I just wanted to, in a sense, just say a few words here, really, to kind of connect some of what you're all thinking about to some other agendas that and try and lure you into thinking about those agendas. And any of you who are interested in being involved in the kind of work that I'm trying to do, that I'm going to say a bit about, I'm hoping that you will look into me a bit more and make contact with me individually, because I'd like to hear from you. Basically, I'm very new. I was raised in this area, so I'm very old to this area, but I'm very new to the university. I haven't been here long. And it was part of a series on digital policy that we did, this Women in Innovation event, where I discovered Reefa and lots of other colleagues here who have created a mountain of women and innovation in the digital sector. But if any of you followed the Fuse report, you might not have known about that mountain. And some of you might know that the Fuse report is very big on the agenda. I've just been at another meeting in London today, where it came up. I wasn't involved in the Fuse project, but I'm involved in a follow-on project from the Fuse project called Fusebox 24. Is anyone here involved in Fusebox 24? Yes, great. Yes, CC down here. So, and basically that's a project that is trying to look at in a granular way what came out of the Fuse, which was this idea that arts and humanities skill sets are very fundamental to creativity in the digital sector. And as lots of you know, I think the government have picked this up, and what was the Technology Strategy Board and is now, last week, called Innovate UK. How many people here are involved in the knowledge transfer networks of the Technology Strategy Board? Okay, just a few. Okay, so one of the things I want to say to everyone here now is that it's now called Innovate UK, if you look it up there, and then they have these knowledge transfer networks that have lots of calls for projects and how you can link to other digital entrepreneurs as well. So this project is really looking at innovation and arts and humanities skill sets within innovation and how it helps make innovators. So we're doing lots of research with the participants in the programme around that. And that's called Fusebox 24. So that's funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, but the event that I was at today was a joint event with the Arts and Humanities Research Council and Innovate UK, looking at how they can work more together to support innovation. I've worked on gender and ICT since the beginning of the internet, so which shows my age. And I have always done development work, and I've always done feminist work. So I was working with women in Zanzibar and in Kenya, first of all. So, and that's a long, long time ago. And I've in the last few months, I've written 2 more pieces about what is the problem in the world now if women are not brought into the central agenda of the digital economy. Because what we call the STEM economy, which is science, technology, engineering, and maths, has been completely created by men and has been completely steered by men. And the trouble is with the digital economy, it threatens to embed that even further. As much as it's empowering a lot of women economically, it threatens to embed that even further. So we have to find ways of bringing women into the centre of policy agendas and into the centre of organisations like Innovate UK, and that's a huge task. But it's a task in a way that I think groups like this have to take on. So I've already spoken a lot around the university at the response we had to our event. This event will help have further conversations. And what we want to do, I think, as a group, is connect to this momentum that has put Brighton in the centre stage and see whether we, on behalf of women generally innovating in the digital economy, can actually campaign to get connected more to those central agendas. Because as Joan says, they're not only about funding, they're very much about the knowledge that you all have and the way that you are innovating. And even at our small seminar, it was clear that there were new strategies and different kinds of strategies that women have for innovating in the digital economy. And that evidence didn't come out in the Fuse report. And not all of it, of course, will have structural relevance to policy agendas, but I can assure you a lot of it will, and we have to find a way of getting it there. So that's sort of one of my big things I'm involved in now. Just to say a couple of things about what the digital economy is. Joan is one of my absolute inspirations in this because the work that she does makes that real. Most of us have come from a trajectory where we think about digital economy as being about ICTs. But why I'm a professor of digital economy is I'm interested in how the digital economy is different from the industrial economy. So what the digital means in the real world, as Joan was saying, and all the work that she does is about how the digital transforms what we mean to think about really fundamental things like getting sunburnt or dealing with buildings in an earthquake. So ICTs are part of that picture, but they're actually much more about what's called the Internet of Everything. In other words, they're actually much more about how when digital technology is embedded in processes and problem solving, it actually changes the potential for doing things and in lots of ways makes things more, that can make things a lot cheaper, can make them more accessible. As Joan was saying, it can make them more attractive, make them seem more interesting. But what her focus is on is solving real world problems. And I think a lot of people in the digital economy now are being steered too much to the service sector, too much to what we might, and I'm not to, you know, obviously those are great things to do and everything, and they're very creative and whatever. But I think Joan, you know, they are creative. But Joan and I would kind of like to draw you into the heavier picture and say, well, those wonderful skill sets that a lot of you are practicing, there might be really huge real world problems that you could contribute those skill sets to and to innovate within. So, and that a lot of those issues are very people-centered and they're very value-driven. So that's the thing I think that's very attractive for a lot of people who, like myself, have a feminist orientation and really want to see the world through a different lens. That's much more people-centered. The digital economy in lots of ways helps us do that. I mean, Joan's work on Parasol is really very gender sensitive. It's very interested in the way that men's identities are formed and the way they relate to something so basic as getting sunburn. So there's lots of things that for instance, from feminist analysis are relevant to these issues that are big questions we have to solve. Do I need to finish now? Good, okay. Let me just check. Okay, so that's my sort of, you know, ending point, is that what we're talking about is really reimagining what the whole world is and how we move around in it and what we do in it and how we relate to it. And I know it's a bit controversial to say it, and it's not to dismiss any of the work that brilliant entrepreneurs are here doing, but I do think we need to think beyond that service idea of what ICTs are about and actually follow Joan and I running down the road trying to drag us all into more interdisciplinary approaches and more connecting with the big picture. Okay, thanks a lot.